Next week will mark 2 years since the Norfolk Southern freight train derailed, including 11 cars carrying hazardous materials. Neighbors had to be evacuated, and days later, emergency crews released and burned toxic vinyl chloride from the cars.
Norfolk Southern senior executive went on to say that there's a real interest on the part of the Department of Justice and the administration to move on, something I've never heard once from the Department of Justice or the administration.
A new study found the destruction from that massive train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, was far worse than initially thought.
Funny, because I always say I feel like I'm living in the Twilight Zone. But some of the journalists will say that too, like it sounds bad, but this is almost like a book, and you just can't believe what's going to be on the next page.
Norfolk Southern then stated that this is an opportunity to close a chapter and allow the community and the railroad to move on.
Hazardous pollution actually spread across 16 states. Researchers estimate that 1/3 of the U.S. population was impacted by that pollution.
The entire exchange ended with what everyone from the NTSB heard in the room was a threat, and it was delivered that way.
But we watch grown-ups YouTube, and our grown-up YouTube in our bedroom don't work. So we watch
probably for the best. Yeah, probably for the best, little man.
and now he's sleeping.
Hey, sing for him your favorite song.
Believer.
What is it?
Hey, work it up, believer.
Oh, by Imagine Dragons. That's a fun song.
I love that song. First things first, I'ma say all the words inside my head.
When talking about the alopecia,
Yeah.
and you said that, you said how many other women?
I know personally I'm one of 5. I don't have their permission. I'm not going to disclose names or anything like that, but just personally that I've talked to online, oh, I've lost my hair too. I've lost my, and I've got my list of just kind of, when people tell me stuff, I've been writing it down and just kind of keeping an area like, oh, where are you located? If I can get the location off of them. Which, I mean, some of them are downtown East Palestine. Another woman was about the same distance I am, but to the west of East Palestine. Yeah, but the doctors still, it's non-scarring alopecia. Your hair should start to grow back in 4 to 6 months. It's definitely, I've tried, homeopathic remedies. They did offer to put me in a clinical trial for some drug, and I'm not interested in that. But I mean, I'm generally healthy. I've never had any issues. I never really get sick that often. I'm generally, like I said, I'm not diabetic or anything like that where I have any health issues. But it's definitely uncommon just for something like this to happen to me. My hair now, I'd be happy to show it to you. Just don't give me that look. It is starting to grow back on this side. I definitely feel a difference. It's softer. My hair felt like Barbie doll hair. Like, I don't know if it is because that day I met you in East Palestine, I hopped in, I got a shower, and I dropped my kids off, and my hair was still wet underneath that hat I had on. So it makes me wonder if because my hair was wet when I went out there, if maybe that had something, because you could taste that stuff in the air that day. I remember talking to you, my voice like was really hoarse. That later that night I got sick. I went to work that night and I had to leave work early. I was just drained. Just didn't feel good. So it makes me wonder if there was stuff in the air that maybe stuck to my wet hair. I don't know. It's hard to say. Nobody really will give me any answers.
So I will admit I don't know a lot about alopecia. I will admit, you know, I don't know a
Oh,
lot.
there's tons of stuff that can cause it. Pretty much anything could cause alopecia.
But I'm curious if it's common in one like area for a bunch of people to get it. If that is common, or does my question make sense?
Yeah.
Is it just a coincidence? That's what I'm at. Does
know.
it feel like that? Does it feel like just a coincidence, or?
No, I don't feel like it's a coincidence. I mean, I don't know any other women that have had alopecia before this. I have learned of one woman that had lost her hair a year before the derailment. She says it was due to COVID. But she also lives closer to the cracker plant as well. But so, I mean, like I said, this area has just been heavily polluted by Shell and by Norfolk Southern in the past 2 years. It's hard to say. So maybe there is some environmental factor that's causing women's hair to fall out around here. Possibly.
This was early on, and I said, well, look, if you keep ignoring the fact that people are sick, you know, if you would at least say you're sick and we don't know why you're sick, I'd have more respect for you than just ignoring it. You know, we were being told it's mass psychosis. How do dogs have psychosis where they imagine tumors on them until the tumors appear? How does a 2-year-old have mass psychosis when he doesn't even have the comprehension of what happened here to cover himself in a rash? Okay, you didn't have a whole 50 kids that caught asthma after the derailment and 100 adults. Like, so many people in the town have asthma now that the local pharmacy was having a hard time getting inhalers.
Started feeling sick around 3 o'clock in the morning, so it was like 5 or 6 hours after the derailment had happened. And this is 2 days before they did the vent and burn, so this is just the first part of the burn. Around 3 a.m. I started feeling a really bad headache, like a dehydration headache, like one of those ones your skull's like just knocking into your brain and out of nowhere. And I started feeling very nauseous, shaky. My teeth started to hurt. My eyes and my like nose and throat started burning. I think my lips were sort of going numb during this first part. And I started smelling a sweet chemical smell. Didn't smell like fire, didn't smell like smoke. So to me, I didn't really know what to make of it. And I'm trying to rationalize it again. And I'm like, oh, I'm just sleep deprived. I'm just giving myself anxiety. I'm, you know, telling myself, I'm like gaslighting myself. And then when I started feeling this, I'm super nauseous. And I'm like, it was just way more than a usual reaction to anxiety. I experience anxiety, I know the difference. I was very much getting sick very quickly. And then within a few minutes, I heard a noise and I thought it was my cats messing with something, but it was my son like coughing. And he wasn't sick before this. Neither of us had any kind of sicknesses recently. And he started like choking, coughing, and I like immediately ran to his room. And when I opened the door, his room is the draftiest, and I opened the door and he was like choking, gasping for air, projectile vomiting, shaking, gasping for water. And he wasn't, like I said, wasn't sick at all before this. And that smell was so much stronger in his room. And his room has always been the draftiest. It was always an issue. We were fixing up his windows and doing extra stuff to it for that reason. And that smell just hit me like a wall when I opened that door. And I knew like right away, I was like, this smells, something's wrong with this. Like there's something wrong here. Like you know, your survival instincts kick in, your parents' instincts kick in. At that moment, I knew we had to leave immediately.
You get frustrated because you know that they're lying to you. Everybody knows their own bodies or their kids, what goes on. People in this town were getting sick. They still are getting sick. And every time you tried to question somebody from the EPA or local official, they said everything's fine and safe. And then the more it seems like the more that they got caught or more proof that came out, then they would backtrack and say, well, yeah, we're going to clean this up. Or, yeah, we need to clean the creeks up. Well, what do you mean you have to clean them up? You just told me 6 months ago they're fine. Or come back in my house. And then to find out that, you sign up for the testing and it's just, they don't get around to it. That part of it is just, it's frustrating. I just wish everybody would have came together and worked to solve the whole problem rather than us getting lied to and having to fight for the children of this town.
They had me talk to some different people. It seemed like the information wasn't consistent, or whenever I brought up something, it didn't make sense to them. I even talked to a biologist that the EPA had in their office, and I said, the roads are overflowing. I said, kids go out and play in these roads. There's rainbow sheens, there's bubbles in it, like there's something wrong. And the biologist from the EPA center on the phone told me, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just rainwater. I said, you must have missed biology in like 6th grade because there's runoffs. I said, my house has a French drain, so anything that was on top of my house, landed on my house, is going to be carried through that French drain right onto the road. Like everyone else's house on that road. It's not just rainwater. It just seemed like you were talking to a bunch of idiots. Like I don't know if they just didn't want to admit it or didn't want to say it or it was too much for them to handle or they couldn't. I don't know what the case was, but it felt like they just didn't know what to do and they didn't want to know what to do unless we brought it up. If we brought something up, it would be taken care of, or they would try to take care of it, or they would say, oh, well, let me look into it. I'll give you a call back. I'll give you an email. It was just nonstop. You could be on the phone for 4 or 5 hours with these people and you wouldn't get answers.
So I don't necessarily want to say, yeah, they gaslit us because I don't have hard evidence on that. I don't have the facts. But what I do know is that they were very lightly describing the situation when we all knew in our gut that it was a lot worse than what they were telling us. You can't just poison a creek that runs from one corner of a town to the other, that runs under buildings, that runs past people's basements, that had 40,000 deaths in that creek, wildlife deaths, fish and whatnot. Something's really bad there, so don't tell us, oh yeah, it's fine, then with your eyes that we're blessed to have, you can go see that they're scooping dead life out of the creek for weeks, months on end,
But my favorite was the mic drop at the end by Hamidi, the chair of the NTSB. That's a woman. That's a woman who has bigger kahunas than most men that I know. All these people are afraid to stand up to Norfolk Southern, even our village government, to, elected officials at the federal level. But here's this woman standing up and saying, no, they impeded this process. They tried to test vinyl chloride off the shelf. They tried to do their own investigation and just give it to NTSB. They tried to get the head investigator fired, and they actually went into the office and threatened the chair of the NTSB. And Hamidi said that, she had gone back and forth with the decision to talk about it because she didn't want to have that overshadow the findings. And I thanked her. And I said, look, you were the first government agency that has been honest with us. And I am so glad you said that because you talk about being gaslit and thinking that you're crazy. Like, you just confirmed everything I thought. You made me realize I wasn't crazy. So that was probably the biggest revelation to me. But I didn't expect the emotion of reliving it all during NTSB. It was so mentally overwhelming. There's a difference between thinking and knowing. It's almost like you secretly hope that you're wrong. Like, I secretly hope that there's no contamination and that my whole community hasn't been poisoned. But when you kind of hear it in black and white, and she knows she's going to be a target, but she still stood up and she did what was right instead of what she was told.
I at that point in time, it was bittersweet because here is a woman that is honest, factual, precise, and loud. Why would anybody threaten that? Why would somebody threaten somebody that is so pure?
Oh, I believe it 100%. I hope she has security with her because that's kind of what they did when you would get on and ask for help, for money. I mean, I live on disability. I get one check a month, and I'm trying to raise these 3 girls on that, and it's hard. So a couple extra $100 means a lot. And if we had to go somewhere and our lives were disrupted so bad, you think they would have been more welcoming to help you out than what they were. I just wish the EPA and everybody would have taken a bigger stand against Norfolk than let them get away with what's happened.
You know, I've been saying that they've been paid off and bullied since the beginning. And after NTSB, it was kind of confirmation of that. If you have the kahunas to threaten and try to impede a federal investigation, you know what they're doing to these local officials in this small village. You know, it's not rocket science, and they're doing it right out in the open, and nobody cares.
I think them trying to bully her into ending this investigation didn't come by any surprise, because I think we can all agree that we all feel as if big corporations, it is, profits are very much prioritized, but I don't mean that disrespectfully. It's when you're looking at that situation, they have a job to do, and their job is to ship goods around the world to create an economy, and that is their purpose. But they should be able to do it a lot safer than what they've been doing it.
It was actually before I met you, about a week or so. I had one of the contractors say I could come, they would come test my home and prove to me that everything was safe. And when I asked about chlorinated dioxins, he kind of like gave me this look and then looked at his buddy that was there with him. And like it just made me feel really uncomfortable. And then a couple times they had come into the restaurant again after that. Just like they tried to bring up, I heard them purposely try to get me to talk about East Palestine, but I was like busy working, and you know what I mean.
They came to your work?
Yeah, that's where I met them one night, because I was talking about how they were lying about the test results, before the EPA press conference where I met you. Yeah. And they were like, we'll come to your house tomorrow and we'll test your surfaces and we'll prove to you that it's safe. And I said, well, can you test for chlorinated dioxins and furans? And they said, no. And he like looked at his buddy and his buddy like made this face, and I was like, he's like, yeah, no, we can't test for them. And I was like, I know you can't.
Like unable to or unwilling?
Both.
Yeah.
Well, they can test for them. It's just, from my understanding, the EPA has to do the testing for chlorinated dioxins for them to acknowledge it, I believe. It has to be done by an EPA certified scientist and then an EPA certified lab as well.
Okay, right.
So in order for the government to accept those results.
Norfolk Southern, the whole operation they did, giving out assistant money and trying to help people, it wasn't followed by straight guidelines or whatever. If you got a worker in a good mood, and you asked for money, they would give it to you readily. If you turned in receipts, they wouldn't even look twice at them. They'd total them up and give you a reimbursement for it. If you went in another day and had a different guy that was in a bad mood, and they'd sit there and tell you, no, you ain't getting nothing. And it just wasn't fair across the board. Some people got $5,000, some people got $100,000. It was just all over the place. There wasn't no set thing, and the employees, like I said, you might get one that's, treated you like a human, and then you get other ones that question everything and why you want the money, and it was just, it's almost like you were begging for help for something that you didn't do or had control of at all. We all went to a restaurant one night, so I had all 6 granddaughters there, Addie and Lenny, and Tracy and I, and I paid the bill with the credit card, and I think it came to like $129 or something. And when I turned it into Norfolk Southern, they said they weren't going to pay it because it was too many people. Now, we only went out to eat one time in 3 weeks that we were down there, and that was the night. And Addie and Lenny were from East Palestine. If they would have turned in, if they would have got it on a separate check and turned theirs in, they would have paid it. If I would have had a separate check and turned mine in, they would have paid it. But because it was all on one, they said it was too many people and they weren't going to pay. And that was just baffling.
Was there any discussion of guideline?
No, they just said, bring back the receipts, whatever you paid. And when they questioned me about it, because they said there's 10 people on this check, and I said, yeah, my daughter and her husband and my 3 other granddaughters, they live in East Palestine too. I mean, they're a mile away from me. And they said there was too many people on the check and they wouldn't pay it. It's just the little things like that you would even have to have it questioned or whatever, or explain yourself. I hate to ask for help myself. I hate it. I had to swallow my pride for these girls to get any help for anything. And the last thing I hate is going in and asking people for help. And that was so humiliating to have to do that. And then to have them turn and tell you no, or we're not going to pay that. Or even the last time I came back with the receipts and they said, we're not doing that anymore. That ended. When I knew they were paying for other people and they were still paying Airbnbs, that's frustrating. But I never thought about it at the time. I never thought that I would have to get 2 separate checks and then have Addie and Lenny turn their receipts in and then me turn my receipt in. No, you had no idea, but you just, when they tell you when you leave, just bring your receipts back and we'll reimburse you or whatever. It's just baffling. It's troublesome, and it was hard. It was hard to deal with that kind of stuff.
Oh, the woman Jody from the assistance center, she liked to mess with people's minds. It's almost like they went through a whole speaking thing. Like, if you're going to work for Norfolk, then you have to know how to talk to people and be arrogant and be an asshole while going under the radar. Well, she said that we could extend our stay, but she wouldn't do it for these days. Then she said she won't extend my stay unless I use the VAP program, which was a house buying program that guaranteed our home value. So I could do that, but I waived my rights. And it was really unclear because it said right in the paperwork, you waive your rights. Well, no one knows what to do. I don't want to waive mine. They said that he was never on my assistance anyways because he had his own house, so they were going to stop paying for him to stay in a hotel with me. So it was kind of like they were bullying me back and forth. Then he lost his job, and they're saying, well, we need to see all of his records of applying to places. We need to see his unemployment since he got that. Every time you would go into the center, you'd see someone getting so frustrated they want to leave, or the way they talked to you was belittling, degrading. And most of these people have grown up never asking people for anything. They've had, the most that was given to them was their family homes. They lived in a town, they were comfortable. Now you have to basically lose your house for that period of time. They offer generic cleaning with Ghostbuster packs and Lysol, spraying it in your house. Then you're upset going to ask for money to stay relocated because you still don't feel like your house is clean. Then they think it's a joke, like everything's safe. The EPA said it's safe. So why are you so worried? Why are you asking for money? You're just begging us for more. Like, it felt degrading. It felt belittling. It's just a lot you take on. And it's because they don't care. It's neglect. They have the money. They can do what they want. Their product's still going to be bought. They can put the narrative out there on the news. A lot of people are afraid to go into the assistance center by themselves because they didn't want that. Like, you would get anxiety to go ask for help to pay for your hotel.
Yeah, I've had the EPA pull me aside asking me if some of the things I've spoken in interviews and online about them gaslighting us was true, if I felt like that. But they pulled me into a corner and kind of like it was sort of intimidating, sure, at a public meeting. But they would ask, like, do you really need to, like, stay out of your house? Or, like, did you really try to clean it? Or how long did you vacuum? Or, like, did you have to buy this, like, thing for your hotel? Or, like, did you have to do, like, they would just, like, nitpick everything. And he calls me out of nowhere, and I was like, wait, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm John with Norfolk Southern. And I'm like, how did you get my number? And he's like, oh, I pulled your number from the file, and I just wanted to see if I could help you out. Like, this was the conversation. I'm like, this feels kind of illegal, I don't know. And I'm like, you know what, I've actually been trying to get another test done. And then he's like, oh, let me pull some strings for you. Like, we're just best friends now. But he's not doing this for anyone else, so I'm like, whatever. So he calls me back. He's like, can you be at your house in an hour? And my hotel at this point was in Cranberry, Pennsylvania, which is nearly an hour away. So I'm like, I guess I'll drop everything and go out there right now. Yeah, I've been trying to get this second test for months. That'd be fantastic. I appreciate it. And I rode down there. It was the day that Trump was in town. All the cops were with Trump, so they couldn't give me my group. I'm talking to this lady. She's their top toxicologist, and she starts just like ignoring me. And she's like, telling me that dioxins weren't even created in the burn, and water has to go really fast or it won't go in the soil. And I called her a liar. I said, you're a liar. And this is the number I'm giving from Norfolk, from DeWine and everybody, like, hey, this is a hotline, you asked for help. And this is the help I was getting. And so I ended up calling her a liar, and I hung up. And then next day, I'm supposed to be there for my test or whatever, and it's not even her going. So I'm just like, I still have my appointment, right? So I go down there. I mean, my life depends on it. My family's trying to live in our house. And so they don't show up. They just totally blew me off. And like when I had talked to this John guy, he was like, if that doesn't work, call me back. Call me right back. Like, don't hesitate. I got your back. Like, yada, yada, yada. And like, so I didn't call him back when they rescheduled. And the next time they were supposed to be there, they didn't show up. Then I called him back. And John doesn't work there anymore. And I'm trying to talk to John again, and he's nowhere to be found. So I go down to the center, and they're like, you can't be here. And I was like, well, John called me, and he told me that, like, he was helping me, and like they were doing all this, and they were gonna do the second test. And they're like, yeah, you can't be here. You have to have a lawyer to be here. And I was like, well, can I talk to your manager? And they're like, no, you can't. I was like, can I have their name at least? And they're like, no, you can't. You're not allowed to be here. You have to have a lawyer to be here. And they kicked me out. Since not been able to talk to this John, nobody can tell me anything about this John, why he called me. They don't know why they did that. But then a few days later, there's something, I forget what happened at that time, but something had changed, and they were just letting me come back. And they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna keep reimbursing you. And no explanation, no story about John or where he relocated or all this other stuff. So
I look back on some videos, and the people that were collecting soil samples were secretly taking pictures of my plates. You could see them taking pictures of my plates. So I was watching them in my rearview mirror. I mean, they make you paranoid, afraid, and basically like you want to give up. You're just so exhausted from the back and forth fighting, the people following you. You feel paranoid, no one believes you, until other people are like, that car followed me, this person did that. Another journalist was following me when I was going door to door trying to help people, and some woman in a vest pulled up and had her camera on me. I introduced myself, and she just kept recording, didn't say a word. So the team that was with me turned their camera to her and said, why are you recording? She's like, get your cameras off of me. And they're like, well, you're recording us, so we figure we're allowed to record you too. And she peeled out. Some of them weren't allowed. Some of them got sick when they came in. I tried to contact them back with updates, and they're like, sorry, my producer won't allow me. Like, we're really interested, and we got sick, and we want to tell your story, but they just would not be allowed. Some people changed their numbers after that. One woman had the same name as me. Her daughter's name was the same. I think she felt too eerily connected, and she really told me, she's like, I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try to give it to my producer again, see what they say. After that, her phone was changed. Now Norfolk is paying the police officers to stay in the building with them and doing their dirty work, looking up people's backgrounds and stuff whenever you go in. So they're telling you about your background, trying to use it against you. I mean, it's, if you know them, you don't want to talk to them, or it's just a big divide, and social media didn't help. And then you have people that had problems with you years and years ago, now they're saying something against you because this whole drama is going on. So it was just constant, and then fake profiles. It was people from the EPA, Norfolk. You look up some of the names, and they're fictional book characters. So they would just continuously bully people through these different venues. Or they'd follow you. They'd make you paranoid.
But is they were directly bullying journalists. They were calling journalists after people did interviews and trying to persuade them that we were lying. And the most evident bullying was the local newspaper. We have a county newspaper, and they hired a woman to just cover the train derailment. So at one point, like Norfolk Southern was saying, oh, all of our creeks are clean because they were testing the top of the water, and it probably was. But at this point, all the chemicals had seeped down into the sediment. So then we were going around, just residents, our creek rangers, we call them, and poking in the sediment, and like these rainbow volcanoes would come out. So then EPA said these are legacy chemicals.
Right, of course.
No, we're country folk. We've swam in those creeks, walked those creeks, fished those creeks, caught creek chubs in those creeks that take down to the river to go fishing. We knew it wasn't legacy. So then we found a video someone gave us from October of 2022, and they were panning for gold in Leslie Run. So it's like a 2-hour video of this guy and his kids just digging down in this creek. All of a sudden, the EPA comes out under the Clean Water Act and tells Norfolk Southern they have to clean it up. But the whole point of that long story, sometimes you kind of need the backstory, was they were tearing out this small bridge across the creek that enters our city park and replacing it. We knew as soon as they dug that stuff up what was going to come out of those banks. So the next day after they start tearing this up, and this is probably like, I don't know, like maybe 2 cars length long bridge over this little creek, there's another fish kill. Bunch of dead fish. So our creek rangers are down there filming it. And Norfolk Southern says, oh, well, no, that's not from chemicals in the creek. This was right before we released the panning for gold video when they were still saying these legacy chemicals. It's not from the chemicals. It's from just the debris. So the next day they take, this was in the newspaper, local newspaper. So the next day, one of our creek rangers took this reporter down to the creek, held the newspaper, showed the dead fish, was poking and showing you the chemical rainbows. And this reporter, she called it she said it was kind of like Men in Black stuff. Because where they had gone, it's at the end of our park walking trail. So it's off of 170, like a main highway, and it has a big dirt parking lot, and it has kind of a little swimming hole that the kids will walk down to, but there's hardly ever a car there when you pull in. When they pulled in, the whole parking lot was full of trucks, and there were people getting out, and they were changing from streetwear to their creek wear, like the stuff that they would wear in the water. So our creek ranger and the reporter kind of started asking them what they were doing. Next thing you know, they said one truck pulls into the parking lot, talks to one guy in one of the trucks. Everybody starts getting back in their cars, just halfway in their creek gear or whatever, get back in the trucks, and then they all pull out in a single file. And the woman said it was like some Men in Black stuff. So she runs this article, and at one point she ran an article, and I messaged her on Facebook, and I was like, that's a great article, like that was really good. And she's like, Norfolk Southern and EPA didn't think so. Well, ever since that, you can go back and look, now it's just these real vanilla stories, like EPA held a workshop, or DeWine came in town, but they bullied. And then just the implied bullying, the fact that our local government would not mention health issues. When you're in a small village like this, you know everybody. You know people are sick, people are coming to you, and you're not saying one word. And when I knew they were being bullied is Unity Council started looking at some of these health trends like seizures. A lot of neurological issues, people started having seizures. And at the time, the mayor would meet with Unity Council, but it was always on the DL. I felt like I don't care, I'm real. I'm gonna give you the real analogy. I felt like the side chick. Okay. He would be riding through town in a golf cart with Alan Shaw smiling, and then he was meeting Unity Council in the back alley. But when I finally just couldn't do it anymore is when, like I said, we were investigating these seizures. We were up to like 13 people that we knew that had seizures. And we had this down low meeting with the mayor, and in the parking lot, he said to me and one other lady, he said, keep this to yourselves. Don't repeat this. I didn't say this. He said, but I'm on a group text with all the first responders, and there was 2 seizures last week. Well, at first I thought he meant first responders, but he later clarified that it was 2 more residents. As the mayor, if you know there was already 13 seizures and you know about 2 more, why wouldn't you be screaming that from the rooftop? I knew right then that they were being bullied, they were being paid off. When we talk about being openly paid off, you know, the fire chief's wife now works at the fire station. His daughter now works there. The deputy fire chief that was on scene in incident command until the fire chief got back in town, his daughter works for Norfolk Southern now as their event planner. You know, they gave $1 million to the school. They gave another 700, they being Norfolk Southern, another 750,000 to the school for a 10-year contract for someone to recruit students to the school. They gave $1 million to renovate. Well, they actually gave the old train depot that sat in town for years, dilapidated. They gave that to the village and also gave them $1 million to renovate it. They hired a economic consultant for $500,000. They hired a PR firm. They hired a marketing firm. They gave the village $1 million, but they have to ask Norfolk Southern before they can spend it. They gave a community liaison $1 million. It was a guy that worked for Norfolk Southern that lived in town. They gave him a job. And it was $1 million, and all through the newspapers it said for community needs. He bought all of our kids ice cream cones at a local business, got everybody haircuts at a local business, got everybody's dogs groomed at a local business. Like, we need indoor air testing. So it's all this facade of just, you know, bought all the kids, you know, no baseball equipment. And it's like open bribery. And then you wonder why people are afraid to speak out.
You know, in so many ways, it sounds like your community is an experiment. Whether
Well,
it's the not just the
right.
the chemicals, but like a disaster experiment.
You would think that, but it's actually like the most, I guess, therapeutic thing for me through this whole disaster has been talking to other communities that this has happened in. Because sometimes you start to think you're crazy. Like, did the CDC really tell our doctors not to test us for vinyl chloride? Like, how can that be real? And then you talk to somebody from the BP oil spill, and they're like, they're still doing that? You know, so one of the first things that I was told is they're going to divide your community. And I said, no, not us. East Palestine's tight-knit. We all look out for each other. The first time I realized what they were doing was right away I started working with a couple, and I got connected with this woman who, her and her husband own most of the properties in East Palestine, most of the buildings. They have a couple businesses. So she had reached out to me right after the derailment. She let us use her one yoga studio to hold our first meeting with independent scientists. They told me that they had a storage area in East Palestine where we could store water that was coming in. So the night after this first meeting, I was taking journalists and dropping them off at their greenhouse to do interviews. And, you know, so the day after this first public meeting, the guy says, hey, we don't have that space for you to put water anymore. We rented it out. Like a week later, they're throwing a Jeep parade through town. A Jeep parade?
So the car.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people that take, you know, there's whole clubs of people that own Jeeps and they put these little rubber ducks in them. I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, they've been bought off. You know, next thing I find out is the EPA, actually the EPA Assistance Center is still in that yoga studio. I heard they were renting a piece of property out by City Lake to them for incident command. I find out that Norfolk Southern, and we find out from an interview from Alan Shaw, not from our local businesses, that Alan Shaw was taking product down to Georgia and selling it for them. You know, right away, you see these businesses start ignoring on TV saying, I promise there's nothing wrong in East Palestine. There's nothing wrong. Come here and shop. And it's like right there, how does someone change their opinion that quick unless it's money? You know, our city has been completely focused on economic development with no focus on human health. Alan Shaw had meetings individually with business owners the business owners are all the ones that meet with the politicians when they come in town, behind closed doors for the most part. 1820 Candle Company, every time a politician comes in, even Biden, that's where they go. Do you think it's ironic that they go to a candle company? If you were trying to cover up a smell, and not to mention, the only place I smelled that smelled worse than my house was our municipal building. It sits on top of the creek right there. When we ask our government, I sent an open letter with some questions. Like, we were told that the reason why it smelled so bad was sewers used to run straight into the creek. And a lot of those old pipes haven't been capped off. And I guess the gas from the tunnel where the creek went through was building up and going up into that pipe into the municipal building. So we asked some questions. I asked how many government positions have been created by Norfolk Southern and who sits in those positions. Did you have, this pipe capped at the municipal building? Because if so, you should have told everybody. And you know what they told me? Get a public records request.